I'm not Green Lantern. I'm Booster Gold.
Superheroes have been a major aspect of modern culture since the early 1900s. Superman is more or less the genesis point for where everyone is pulling their influence from, even indirectly, when it comes to superheroes. You'd be hard-pressed to think of a time before they even existed, especially now. Superhero fiction, mostly due to massive films that have only gotten more commonly produced from the 2000s onward, are a major factor in this. Yet with this comes a strange circumstance. While superheroes are a big part of our culture, there are still many superheroes that sit within a sort of in-between. Ones that have many fans, yet haven't truly broken into the mainstream. And so many of these characters are beloved by comic fans, but that's the primary aspect to the strange phenomenon. Being a fan of superhero comics is not really mainstream, but being a fan of superheroes is. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not reading comics. In fact, I believe this issue has arrived due to a lot of mismanagement and just an unclearness of where anyone's even supposed to start. Which, as a comic reader, I'll tell you if you're struggling where to start. It's as simple as this. Find a character you like, for any reason. It doesn't matter how shallow it is. Pick up an issue of any number, or try to look up some volumes or graphic novels and go from there. Mild tangent aside, today I want to talk about one of those heroes that I believe is still trapped in the in-between. This character is one of my favorite superheroes and possibly my favorite character in all of DC Comics. This hero could easily become a mainstream hit in the same way that Iron Man went from a B to C tier Marvel hero to a global figure overnight. This character is the Corporate Crusader, the Time Traveler, our special golden boy, Booster Gold. So, yeah, Booster Gold. If you're a fan of DC Comics, you're more than likely familiar with this character. Maybe you don't know about him, but you know of him. And I'll say right here, you're absolutely missing out. I think Booster Gold is one of the most dynamic, unique, and heartfelt superheroes in all of superhero fiction. But before I start my Booster Gold review, let me introduce some personal history with the character, as well as my personal experience with superhero media in general. That way you understand where I'm coming from. My first and possibly still favorite superhero is Spider-Man, and this is for pretty obvious reasons. I was born in the early 2000s, and thus the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy was a major aspect of my childhood. Now the second superhero I was introduced to, and is also still one of my favorites, is Superman. Because again, I'm a 2000s baby, and Smallville was introduced to me at the right time of my life. As we all know, the 2000s was sort of the gestation period to the massive MCU and superhero environment we live in today. So for a kid like me, getting my superhero fix wasn't hard at all, but my fortress of solitude to get whatever I wanted was my local library. Because I was poor and thus the library was more or less my equivalent to streaming in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Of course, I read a metric crap ton of comics and manga, and also rented a ton of TV shows and DVDs I picked up. But there was one show that I picked up called Justice League Unlimited. And truthfully, I could make many videos on how good the DC animated universe is. And not gonna lie, it's better than most connected universes in most media we see today. Let me just say that JLU is essentially the perfect show to introduce kids to how cool so many DC characters are. I mean, I doubt I'd be a fan of The Flash or Green Arrow without this show. But one of my absolute favorite episodes of this series is The Greatest Story Never Told. And from then on out, I was a big Booster Gold fan. They wrote this character to be so likable throughout the whole episode. A character who has the unique characteristic of wanting to do superheroics for superficial things like fame and wealth, but deep down is a genuine person who's absolutely willing to do the right thing, despite the fact that nobody might ever know. From there, I read a lot of Booster Gold material. Booster Gold Volume 2 by Dan Jurgens and Jeff Johns, Justice League International, 52 Pickup, and many, many more. Yet, there is something I haven't read, and I don't really know why. I've never actually read the first volume of this character, the stories that are foundational to Booster Gold as he is today. So, why don't I do that for this video? Go back to Booster Gold's roots to show the probably small audience that I have that Booster Gold is the best superhero you've never seen. Hey, before we get any further, my analytics tell me that about 95% of my viewers aren't subscribed. Look, I don't really like when YouTubers do this either, but maybe think about subscribing if you like the video, and check out some of my other videos too. I'm hoping to at least make it past the 500 subscriber mark soon, and I hope you can help me do that. It genuinely helps and makes me happy because I don't really make money on these videos whatsoever. They're mostly just done as a passion project, but If I could make money on these videos and you'd help me get there, I'd really appreciate it. And hey, maybe once I hit about 1,000 subscribers, I'll try and make a big special video. But sorry for the interruption. On with the video. Booster Gold was introduced in Booster Gold Issue 1, released February 1986. And this is a rarity for superheroes, since I'd say it's pretty usual for many popular comic characters to be introduced in either anthology series or other characters' books. Superman was introduced in Action Comics number 1, Spider-Man was introduced in Amazing Fantasy number 15, hell, Deadpool was introduced as an antagonist in X-Force. Another rarity I'd say about Booster Gold's creation is that there is one sole creator, Dan Jurgens. And Dan Jurgens has a very extensive and important career in comics, mostly working with DC, but he's worked with so many characters and events that were highly influential to DC Comics and its continuity, or even had massive impact on our culture as a whole. He's done a lot of work for Superman, including writing The Death of Superman and The Return of Superman, but also has done a lot of work with major DC series like Teen Titans, Justice League, Batman, Green Arrow. You get the picture. But also did a lot of work for Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse like The Mighty Thor and Captain America. When talking about the creation of Booster Gold in an interview with none other than the Boosterific.com, the Booster Gold fan site, he had a few things to say. For one, he had this to say about Booster Gold's point of inspiration. Much of Booster was inspired by the '84 Olympics, when I saw an athlete described as having an endorsement contract without ever having won a medal. Many of the Booster Gold ideas were already in place, but that sort of galvanized it, he said. And when he asked where the name Booster Gold comes from, he stated this: self-boosterism becomes Booster Gold. Gold equals the interest in money, or strike you get rich. Which, when researching, apparently boosterism, as defined by the Collins Dictionary, is defined as the practice of enthusiastically praising something in order to persuade other people that it is very good, even if it is not. And that fits Booster perfectly. I personally always thought Booster was meant to be in reference to his tech-based powers, sort of like a booster on a spaceship or something. But knowing that it's actually in reference to boosterism makes a lot more sense. One last question that I think he answers well is why he even was allowed to make a whole new character for the DC Universe, despite the fact he was essentially an up-and-comer when he made this character. He goes to say, why was I allowed to do Booster? Well, I didn't make the decision, but I do know this. When I first explained it to Dick Giordano and told him the basic idea of what the character could be and who he was, Dick saw him as someone who was entirely different than anyone else in the DCU. I think some of Dick's background as an editor, where he often handled somewhat offbeat characters, may have had something to do with that. But he was attracted to the book, and as a managing editor, gave me the thumbs up and approved the project. Sometimes younger, untested talent will actually pay off with somewhat different ideas and concepts. For the record, Dick Giordano was an executive editor of DC, on top of being a writer, penciler, inker, cover artist, and editor. He did a lot for DC, including introducing a lot of Charleston Comics characters into DC's main continuity. So without him, there'd be no Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, The Question, and so many other characters that are commonly associated with DC today. Now, I'll also say I did send Dan Jurgens an email myself for maybe some clarification on his creative process in relation to Booster Gold. Though at the time of writing this video, he hasn't emailed me back. Maybe I'll make a community post if he ever does. I do hope he's doing well, and don't go to email Mr. Jurgens for my sake, probably has enough to deal with as it is. But anyways, I think with all that history introduced to you all, I think we could finally dig into Booster Gold's first volume. So before I start this review, I'm going to structure this similar to my previous Fantastic Four video, which you should go watch after watching this one. To explain, I'll split the comics into a collection of arcs or plot lines, because I want to give my brief overview and thoughts on the comic as I'm reading it, but I'm not going to review literally every single issue. Besides, you should go out and read it for yourself if you want an opinion on every single issue, okay? Now, with all that being said, let's start with Arc 1. Arc 1, Booster vs. the 1000, issues 1 to 4. So here we have an introduction to our title character, Booster Gold. We immediately see our hero just basking in his glory and fame, setting up deals, doing commercials, and being a pretty strong face for the crowd. We also get introduced to Booster Gold's crew and his corporation, Gold Star Inc. Here we have Booster's lovable robot companion Skeets, his manager Dirk Davis, and his overworked assistant Trixie Collins. And they all have an interesting dynamic because all of them are working together to keep up the name of Booster Gold. In a sense, I would kind of compare it to how an entire crew or brand are built on a big music artist or an athlete or something. Anyways, this arc focuses heavily on examining how Booster takes part in his own media circus. One interaction I really like is this one, where Booster Gold is fighting the villain Blackguard. Blackguard says, "You're an amateur, Gold, a rookie. Run while you can." While Booster immediately responds, "Not a chance, the TV crews are here now." which, 1, is really funny, and 2 is just a nice little encapsulation of how Booster thinks at this current moment in time. Overall, these first 4 issues go over Booster getting into the superhero fame world while setting up a main villain faction, the 1000. To explain who the 1000 are, they're a supervillain faction that is controlled by one man, the Director, and is sort of like a supervillain crime syndicate or mafia, even paying off villains and hitmen to do jobs for them and accomplish other goals and such. Now, of course, Booster Gold goes after them and apprehends them, yet something odd happens. There's a lot of information that Booster shouldn't know. And this is a great setup to a mystery because they focus on how we really don't know anything about Booster's past. Sure, we see him interact with the other heroes, like the deep-cut character The Thorn, but nobody can really get a good read on him, and he has this strange habit of getting things like simple idioms wrong and other things. This is a great first set of issues, giving us a very clear-cut set of characters, fun dynamics, and giving us a hero who might not be completely trustworthy. Arc 2. Booster Gold vs. Superman. Issues 5 to 7. The next 3 issues immediately hooked me when I saw the premise. I mean, for one, I love Superman and I like Booster Gold, but from a writing standpoint, this should be great for character dynamics and dialogue. We've got debatably the most selfless and powerful man in the DC universe versus the man who was doing heroism for all the wrong reasons. So, how does Superman react to the hero for fame? Well, let's just say it's pretty good. And you might predict how he reacts, but it's still great. The first issue isn't the one where they meet, but it does set up how the public reacts differently to Booster than Superman. There's a classic scenario of a terrorist-like villain taking an event hostage, but that isn't what interests me about the setup here. Instead, all the police kind of make it clear that they prefer Superman to handle this than Booster Gold, which pisses him off because he's been trying his damnedest to present himself as a reliable hero. So Booster goes completely against the wishes of the police and makes the situation much worse. He does defeat the villain, but not before having to fly into the sky to have the bomb explode in a place where the citizens won't get harmed. The police are a bit angry about how bad the situation got, but what's interesting is that Skeet reminds Booster to act like he was born in 1966. That's a pretty weird thing to say. But after this issue, we get to the meat and potatoes of this arc. And it's smart to have the previous issue highlight how the public views Booster Gold in comparison to Superman before having them interact, because that lets the idea into the reader's head that Booster and Supes are quite different as people. But it also gets us wondering how Superman might feel about Booster. Is he going to be kind? Is he going to be harsh? Is he going to be neutral? Well, Superman immediately figures out what's going on with him. For one, he learns that Booster's powers are tech-based, primarily coming from a suit and its force field that protects him. And we immediately get to see that Supes does not agree with Booster's lust for fame, which makes absolute sense that he'd see him in this way. Of course, this builds an animosity between the two. So when they get pulled into a political issue that involves an alien world, it's complicated. Booster acts incredibly rash. While Supes, being the rational guy he is, makes it clear he wants to wait, Booster is incredibly immature throughout the whole arc. However, this makes complete sense. He probably idolizes Superman, and to learn that he hates his guts? Yeah, that's rough. Plus, Booster isn't used to acting like a hero yet, and quite frankly, he is absolutely the type of guy to act in a really rash way. We've seen him act like this before, thus setting up a payoff and showing his character as he should be at this point in time. We also get a big piece of information given to us by Skeets, as we learn Booster is from the future, 2462 to be exact, and that he came back in time to be a hero. Booster's backstory is a bit tragic, having his entire life in the past, or rather the future, fall apart. His real name is Michael John Carter, his nickname being Booster. He was on a football college scholarship, but lost it due to betting on his own games. Eventually, the only job he could get was a janitor at a superhero museum. He studied superhero history, the limited amount he had access to, and came to the idea of stealing a time machine and going back in time to be a hero. A chance to make a much better life for himself. And this is one of my favorite origin stories for a hero because I think I, and probably you too, would do the exact same thing in his shoes. So far, this series is really ramping up and giving us some great character work, but will it continue into the next arc? Arc 3, Time Bridge, issues 8 and 9. This two-part arc is centered around a plot of the 1000 to kill President Ronald Reagan. And while I personally don't like Ronald Reagan, killing off a president can be a pretty disastrous event, especially when it's being done by the villain syndicate, the 1000. Thus, Booster Gold eventually intervenes in their scheme to take power over the US government. Of course, the problem is that there's a couple of people from the Legion of Superheroes that come back from even further in the future, back to the current year of the book, which is 1986. You see, the Legion members are from the 31st century, yet they have very little records on Booster Gold. Thus, when they find Booster's abandoned and broken time machine, they assume that he might be an assassin out to kill the president. This creates a large conflict where obviously Booster fights the Legion members and the 1000's hitman, eventually getting a lot of good press on him for saving the president. Now, while I don't think this arc is as good as the last one, I do think it sets up a lot of interesting pieces of info to set up for the future. Booster is now a more liked public figure. The 1000 now see him as a threat more than ever, and I'm interested to see where they take that. Arc 4. The Betrayal, issues 10 to 12. The next 3 issues build greatly on what was set up in the previous arc. We learned that the 1000 have really cracked down on getting Booster out of the way. The only issue is that nobody knows anything about Booster in the public eye. Thus, they decided to blackmail Booster's manager and start to go after his team and even Skeets, trying to get info on him and blackmail him. A massive final battle happens between Booster and the director of the 1000, but at a cost, gravely injuring him, and even breaking Skeets. Now here I think is where the series starts to really dig into Booster as a person and the people he keeps around him, especially this point, pushing him to his edge, and now he's slowly dying due to injury and sickness, and I'm more than excited to see where this will go. Arc 5. Back to the Future, issues 13 to 15. In this whole arc, we really see Booster being pushed to his limits. The public have now turned against him due to anti-superhero rhetoric getting popular with the masses. They invaded his hospital and attacked him. Not only that, but Booster is dying due to illness, something they don't know how to cure, so their only choice is to go back to the 25th century. And there, shit hits the fan. He's a wanted criminal there, and the government is so corrupt that they've made it so he will be killed with no trial. He's being hunted by an agent named Broderick, and he is just ruthless in his pursuit. We also learn of the bleak future Booster is really from, the US having to be rebuilt after a nuclear conflict. Information either being lost or completely withheld by the corrupt government, and even mutants who are trained to attack people and are used by the police as weapons. We also meet Booster's only family he has left, his twin sister Michelle, and she acts sort of like his anchor in this whole situation, along with Trixie. And yet, we end on a good note, that Booster's mom passed away proud of him. And I won't say for what, because it's genuinely wholesome and you should read it for yourself, but this might be my favorite arc in the entire series, maybe even my favorite Booster Gold story, but there's a lot of good ones. It's definitely top 5. Arc 6. Fresh Start, issues 16 to 18. This arc is more so just a fresh start for the characters after the event of the last 2 arcs. A breath of fresh air for us and them. We see Booster rebrand his company into Booster Gold Incorporated, or BGI for short. We see Booster stop a massive infection being spread, and even see Booster show more people he's a worthy hero. And what I like is we could tell that Booster has changed quite a bit. He seems more into helping people with his amassed wealth and tech. It's like Booster has taken to heart all the criticisms of his public image and actions and is working to be better. Plus, we get a lot of growth from everyone here, seeing them form into more of a friend group than just a collection of co-workers and bosses. A sort of slow building arc between all these people that has been properly built off. It feels natural even. Arc 7. Chromatic Chaos, issues 19 to 20. Here we have a small arc about Booster combating a color-themed villain, the Rainbow Raider. And while on paper that sounds kinda useless, this man is literally manipulating light and color to injure and harm people. It's insanely creative and fun to watch. And while Booster doesn't grow much here, we do see him struggle with the press pushing his failure to capture the Raider against him. And in a way, Booster has only himself to blame for the press's harsh treatment of him. He wanted all the superhero fame and limelight, and that comes with consequences. Arc 8. The Invasion of Dimension X, issues 21 to 22. Here is my second favorite arc of the series. We see Booster and his sister Michelle, with a stolen supersuit, struggling to combat an invading alien force. These aliens from Dimension X break down dimensional barriers and force Booster into a rough decision. Either save the citizens being attacked in an invasion, or save his captive sister. And he has to save the citizens. He wouldn't allow himself to take the selfish choice. At least not anymore. Luckily, his friends in the Justice League come to save the civilians in time. But he doesn't come out unscathed. He was about to get his sister out of Dimension X when his sister gave her life to make sure Booster makes it out alive, leaving Booster grieving with yet another loss. Losing his sister, his mother, the public's goodwill. It's all starting to weigh down on him. Arc 9. Tying Up Loose Ends, issues 23 to 25. Here's a set of mostly unconnected issues as the final set of stories from Booster Gold, and sadly, while I do think there's some great stuff here, I do think these last 3 issues suffer from an issue a lot of superhero comics from Marvel and DC tend to have. It's a problem I like to call event necessity. Essentially, the last 2 issues of the story suffer from absolutely needing to read the event that was happening at DC Comics at the time. I think it was called Millennium. And while I bet the event is great, I think I and many people find it frustrating that we need to read another comic to get the whole story. It could be frustrating for collectors, new readers, recurring readers, and probably creators too. Plus, if I want to read Booster Gold, I, as a reader, would not like to have extra homework to get the story I want to read. Nothing wrong with crossovers or anything, that's more than welcome. But usually keeping major moments of characters' development in an event comic is more than frustrating unless that's intentionally what the comic was naturally building towards all along. Kinda like how Donny Cates' Brilliant Venom run ends with the King in Black event. However, I do love the elements of the story here, pushing Booster to his limits, completely ruining his publicity, isolating him, and making him want to quit. However, I love that his Justice League friends make him realize now he's a hero because it's just what he's natural at. Booster is a good person at heart, and really always has been. He's just needed to be given the right situation to be the person he was always meant to be. And now, as he's at his lowest, he decides that after all he's lost, all that he's hurt, to quit now wouldn't be right. He needs to use his power for the good of the world, because that's who he really is. And really, this gets right down to the core of the character and gets to why Booster Gold is one of my favorite superheroes, maybe even one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. On the surface, he comes off as this guy who's in it for the glamour, the glory, the admiration. And while he doesn't exactly hate the fame, he's learned that that's not what he's about. Booster Gold is such a unique character in comparison to most DC heroes, if not most superheroes in general. Just look at some of the biggest DC heroes. Superman has his home of Smallville, Batman has his fortune, and Wonder Woman has the support of the Amazonians. But Booster? He came from literally nothing. A single mother raising her 2 kids, just wanting to be someone who could bring in money for his family through college ball, and he made a big mistake. He threw his life away by accident. So given the situation Booster's in, wouldn't you do exactly what he did? Run away from it all, make a world where you could be one of the biggest superheroes, and yet Booster deep down was just doing it to fill a hole he had in his heart. But eventually he grew up, got older, lost a lot, and learned that deep down he just wanted to do good, to matter to someone. And he got exactly what he wanted by being what he knew he was. Because while he does have a hole in his heart, a heart made of gold is still a very special power to anyone who knows how to use it. And that's all I really gotta say about Booster Gold. As you can tell, he's one of my favorite characters ever written. So, at the end of it all, do you like the video? Did you not? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Well, if you do, then leave a comment down below. And if you do agree, do the same thing. I hope you all enjoy, and maybe in the future, if this does pretty good, I'll make more comic-based videos. But for now, I think all I gotta say is, see you next time.